My guests surprised me they told me about 15 minutes ago they were going to be joining me in studio. So, uh, well, they have multiple residences, so they weren't that far away, about 40 minutes. We went, actually, I'll start with a little trivia question here. My guests are geologists. They have something in common with Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong. They collect moon rocks. Darr and Dorothy Moon joining us this morning. And of course, Darr, last time you were with us was about probably 5, 6 weeks ago.
That's right, yes.
And Dorothy, I think the last time you were with us is probably sometime maybe in summer.
Yes, probably.
Okay. And of course, you serve in the state legislature.
Yes, yes.
Representative from District 8, which, as you pointed out to a crowd here in Twin Falls yesterday, is frankly massive.
It is. Yes. So we have Custer, Lemhi, Boise, Gem, and Valley County. So I have about 16,000 square miles of this state. Almost 30%.
So you get into Idaho City now and then.
Yes, a lot.
Shop for some antiques.
Get a new gold pan.
To walk through that store, though, I need to drop 100 pounds. It's just because everything is so narrow.
It is fun.
We wanted to mention your remarks yesterday because one of the reasons you spoke at this rally before the city council meeting, and you've mentioned this to both of you to me before, business-wise, you do a lot of shopping in Twin Falls.
Yes,
so
that's right.
And a lot of people, would say, well, why are you involved? Well, there are a lot of stakeholders in this. It's not just people who live here. It's people who come here and they shop or they do business here. And so and the businesses were going to pay the big price on a lot of this too as well. But you offered some remarks yesterday for about 10 minutes before the event. Mm-hmm. And for people who weren't there, maybe recap a bit of what you talked about.
Well, sure. First, I followed Dr. Wool, and if nobody had the opportunity to listen to her remarks, she was spot on.
Right.
She gets it, and sadly, she's a target now by our executive branch, and that's really unfortunate. But anyway, she was spot on. I'm really glad to have made that acquaintance. But yeah, as far as the businesses here, that's who it impacts. And we do come down here. Dar's mom and dad, they live in Hayburn area, and we come down. He just got out of the hospital for not COVID. Let's make sure we stress that. But we do come down here and do a lot of shopping. Up in Chalice, we have a few stores, but when we come down, we try to get a lot and come, take it back to the cabin in bulk. And then I go to Onyx for some facials. And you think it's easy to get a facial around here? Not with you have a mask on. You can't do it. And my golly, I don't want to see them closed up.
Tell me you're Nancy Pelosi.
That's right. And, I frequented one of the restaurants yesterday. And this is true. When I went in and we were getting to go lunch because we were running, we wanted to be there by 3 o'clock. And the gal said that the owner was going to be at the rally and at the city council meeting. I thought, well, thank goodness, because if the businesses don't start standing up, they're the ones who are really in trouble. And then the services that they provide and goods for the folks here in the community and around the state, we all suffer. So I think it was a very important time for us to come down and visit with the people, because this area, Twin Falls is tough. Twin Falls is tough, and they've had a few rallies trying to let the conservatives and more liberty-minded folks know that there are people here of like mind.
Somebody wants to get in touch with you by my cell phone, obviously.
Obviously.
I'll just make sure that from Morristown, New Jersey, it tells me.
Okay.
I just forgot to turn that off today.
I just
Happens once a year or so.
Uh-huh.
But you made a comment yesterday too while you were here, and I caught this right away. You asked, because of those big crowd, you couldn't tell who all was there, but you said, how many other state legislators are here? And there was silence. Now, there's a big contingent that represents Twin Falls, and yet, again, silence from the crowd. And I think that speaks volumes. And I know you don't necessarily want to perhaps throw anybody under the bus, but if this was going on and you were in the 8th district,
Mm-hmm.
and this was going on somewhere in the 8th district, I would assume that you'd have a big legislative response. Maybe all three of you would turn out.
Yes, correct. And it is very important because the people want to see that we are involved. I do know that Representative Senate-elect Zito had every intention of being here, but she did have an obligation that she had to attend to. I spoke with the lieutenant governor, and she was very much so wanting to come. And as well as I do, the lieutenant governor is a hands-on lieutenant governor. She attends as many events as she can. She wants to meet with the people and hear their concerns. So those two folks really wanted to be here. But yes, I was surprised. And it's not like they have to drive 175 miles to get here. I mean, I'm not saying that we're martyrs because we did. Again, we have multiple things we were doing down here, but we definitely were going to come down to this rally. And the fact that we left a place that was warmer than Twin Falls.
Yeah.
I mean, it was warmer in Stanley. I'm not kidding. The wind blowing down here is just piercing. But look how many people stuck it out. 300 people, and if not more, and they stood the whole time. And some people with coats thinner than mine. They're obviously upset and they want to be heard, and that's very important.
Well, while I was watching this yesterday, one of the speakers mentioned that Post Falls had also yesterday rejected the idea. So perhaps we're reaching the point where the public is just saying enough.
Correct. And Representative Wisniewski, Tony Wisniewski, texted me and said, "Hey, Dorothy, we just defeated on a 4-2 vote in Post Falls." So that is important that people are getting off the couch, going out in the warmest clothes they can find, and standing up and letting folks know that they're upset with what's happening.
Did you get to stick around for this meeting in the entirety, or?
No, we had to leave at about 4:30 because his sister flew in from California again. His father just got out of hospital.
So when you got word of the result, though, probably sometime late evening.
Yes, yes.
And here's the thing. I brought this up earlier. I'm concerned there could be a bit of a Pyrrhic victory here because there's a lot of pressure, I was told yesterday, from South Central Community Health, as well as, the Statesman this morning carries an editorial saying, hey, Governor, look what happened in Utah. Monkey see, monkey do. And so that there's this media full court press that is going on because if the city of Twin Falls says no and Post Falls says no, but then these health districts and the governor come along and say, well, they're doing it in Utah, we might as well do it here. It doesn't really matter. It all becomes a moot point.
Well, come on, Bill. Mainstream media now runs the country in our state.
Yes.
Obviously, they're trying to stir the pot. I've never listened to Idaho Statesman, Idaho Press, and I'm not going to start. I hope the governor doesn't either. Fact of the matter is, he was going to stay back, but the sad part is he's letting the bureaucrats make the call. He's making unelected bureaucrats with these health districts tell us what to do, and this is not a law. This is not law. The legislature had no part in any of this, and that's a very important point.
You spoke yesterday too about what might happen when you reconvene because there was an special session in September, but we could see perhaps his powers, his emergency powers, curtailed considerably after New Year's.
Yes, he has a 30-day limit, and this rolling order, and he just rolled it again for another 2 weeks. Really, no rhyme or reason except for the numbers are going up, but Bill, the deaths haven't, and that's a really important point. We're still in the 600s. Now, this has been going on since March. We're talking 8 months. And I don't know if you saw the statistics where someone did a comparison of the deaths over the past this year and the past 2 years, the first 6 months of all causes. And in this year, it was less than the previous 2 years with the fear of this pandemic and people dying in the street. I mean, it's really been unbelievably overblown. And I don't want anybody to have to go through COVID. I don't want them to go through cancer. I don't want them to have to go through the flu. But it happens. And we just do the best we can to prepare ourselves for it. And I want to add one more point, too. It's amazing how we don't talk about preventative measures. Yesterday, Dr. Woolsher stressed zinc, vitamin D3, vitamin C. Get a lot of rest. So here we have ways to help deal with COVID should someone unfortunately get it. But that isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about you put a mask on, you keep away from people, you can't go to Thanksgiving dinner, you make sure your hands are so dried out from antibacterial. Yeah, I see. Yeah, it's everywhere in here. But anyway, but we need to look at prevention. We don't need to be so explosive in going after people with things like mask mandates and fines.
Darr, you posted something the other day I noticed on social media from a writer, Tessa, I think is her name.
That's correct.
And she's suggesting that this is all really just part of a great big PSYOPs effort.
It is. I mean, And the reason this is so important here in Twin Falls is this is the beginning of a major great reset, as she put it, and as it is known across the world. Um, if you can get people to cower behind their masks, you can get them to do anything. And this is kind of a first shot across the bow. People need to stand up and draw a line, say, no, government can't solve this problem. People have to solve this problem. You and your neighbors have to solve this problem. Uh, there's no government solution here that's going to be good for your civil rights or your property rights. And so the Twin Falls rally was heartwarming in many ways because people did draw that line, and the council acquiesced, at least for now. Jerome is coming up. I think people need to do the same thing. Um, but it's incumbent upon all of us as citizens to do our duty. You know, freedom isn't a free deal. You've got to stand for it or you're going to lose it. And this article that you mentioned that I posted is talking on a global basis. You look at Britain; they've fallen apart. They no longer have civil liberties. Australia is down the tubes, um, and we're the last stronghold. And there's no place to go after America. So it's time, to amp it up. Now, it's not to say that we're not concerned about COVID, and there are certainly people that uh, need to take extra precaution. But the mask mandate is a ridiculous uh, thing. There's no guidelines. I mean, a face covering. Maybe you could show up with a Guy Fawkes mask, um, or a nylon sock over your head. When we've all seen people wear masks that their nose is hanging out, or I've even got a guy who's smoking a cigarette through a hole in his mask. It's hilarious. Um, and the real reason I think Dorothy showed up to the mask deal was that her Mary Kay lady isn't selling much lipstick, and boy, you don't mess with a woman's lipstick.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, we've got about a minute before our first break. And for folks who'd like to know a little bit more about what you do, Idaho on Fire is a great resource.
Well, Idaho on fire is a metaphor. We kind of started in the conflagration of all the fires in central Idaho. Our forests were burning down. Fortunately, we've been pretty lucky with the weather here. We've gotten rain, but the fires are burning tremendously all over the West, and that's kind of the seed. But Idaho is on fire, as is America, with other issues, all kinds of issues. And we hope to be at Idaho on Fire um, a discussion group that can push an agenda to legislation through community action, um, kind of a thinkers channel. So, people are welcome to join. It is a private group. It's Idaho on Fire on Facebook. If you want to join, look it up and tag us.
And I was going to say, you get a lot, you get a variety of opinion. It's not all just, from, in lockstep.
That's correct, and I think that's important. Some people complain that there might be a troll or two among us, but sometimes it's good to throw a little bait out there and let the sharks chew it up. So we keep it pretty lively. Now that winter is upon us, and I'm not so much up on top of the mountain without an internet connection, I'm a little more uh, busy with it. But we'd enjoy to have some of your audience on the site.
We've got more coming up with Darr and Dorothy Moon in just a moment. Of course, Darr, as I said, founder of Idaho on Fire. Dorothy, representative from District 8 in the state legislature. It's 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Cully on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Couple of guests joining us. I was going to say they drove all the way from Chalice, which is technically true, but they actually were in Rupert overnight. So that cut their trip in about half. State Representative Dorothy Moon and her husband Darr, and he is the founder of Idaho on Fire. It's coming up on 8:23, and it's 30. Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Tell you what, before we get back into discussion, I have a telephone caller who would like to reach us, and quickly too, I'll pass along that number. It's 208-736-0300, or if you've got a message you can't call in, you can always drop me a line via email, instant message, or if you've downloaded the app for your smartphone. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Darr and Dorothy Moon. Go ahead.
Good morning, Bill. I've got a question for Miss Moon. And I haven't heard all of you guys' conversation. I apologize. I come in a little bit late.
No, wait a second. It's Mrs., but go ahead.
Mrs. Moon. Apologize. So, Mrs. Moon, when you guys are reconvened in January, what are you and the rest of the legislators going to do to, one, rein in Governor Little? Because I think it's blatantly obvious he's overstepped his bounds and listening to Ada County too much. He's trying to bow to Ada County. And then also, too, how do you keep him essentially on your side at the same time? Because I believe we've got a heck of a fight coming up as a state against the federal government here in the next 2 years. So I'm just kind of wondering what are you and the other legislators doing to go, okay, we need to figure out how to get control of Governor Little.
We'll toss it to you.
Thank you for the multiple questions. And yes, it is an issue. I think one of the bigger issues, let me just start with this, is that we've already been hearing that they want to try to keep the session shorter. And there's no way, as a legislature, that's kind of our call. We will stay there until our work is done. And one of the first things we do need to tackle is this overreach, totally ignoring the legislature and this entire pandemic and its effect on the state. The 30-day, he has the right to call an emergency for 30 days, but this continuing rolling emergency is wrong. But we will make it to where, or we hope, I mean, there's a lot of times things go out of the Senate. I mean, it's passed through the House, it gets to the Senate, and then it gets stalled. And hopefully, we do have a couple of new folks in the Senate. Senator-elect Christy Zitto, we're very hopeful that she can lead the charge in uniting both of these chambers to where we can put decisive legislation in action before the governor and get either a veto and have a veto override with enough folks, or he will sign it. But the legislature has got to be involved. We do currently have a right to call ourselves back into session. However, leadership did not support us in that move. And when, let's see, there were 15 of us that showed up this summer, and we were kind of ridiculed for wanting to represent our folks and stop this emergency order. We will continue to fight. And there's now a lot more new representatives who have been elected who feel the same way. So I think we're going to have some movement. Aside from the 30-day emergency order, the other big issue is appropriations. That's our job. We have not been consulted at all. And I do know that the lieutenant governor sits on this CFAC meeting. She attends those meetings and she reports out to all of us. And I think when we spend $300 million of federal funds to hire a call center in Oregon to take care of calls on unemployment and not hire folks in this state, we have an issue. And as a legislature, we never would have let that $300 million go out of state. So those are the kind of things that get me riled up, and I'm sure a lot of the others in the House. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting. I don't know how else to say it, but things are going to change. They have got to change. There's 3 branches of government here in this state, and we have been totally ignored. And sadly, our leadership should have been standing up to the governor on this, and that didn't happen.
We have another caller. Caller, you're up next. It's 827 on KLIX. Go ahead.
Good morning, Bill. Good morning, Dorothy and Darr. And thank you to the Moons for showing up yesterday in support of the people of Idaho. And it speaks volumes that the 6 people who are supposed to represent this part of Idaho didn't show up yesterday outside of City Hall or at City Hall. And the problems with the governor, Mrs. Moon just said it. If you listened really careful, our local constituency basically works for the governor. And the governor is off the rails. And if you haven't figured that out, basically you have whatever you want to call it. You have Democrat representation elected by Republicans who don't seem to be able to pay attention to who they're actually electing. And I hope that if we have a legislative season, the king doesn't draw that to a close somehow before it starts, that the legislature is able to get together, since it's predominantly Republican, and they have a Republican website that says what their platform is, that the majority of them quit being Democrats and turn the government back over to the people.
On that note, we got
government.
to get to a break in just a moment. I hope that doesn't make the governor too sore.
Well, I hope not too.
Yeah.
I hope not too. But, and it's been difficult, I'm sure, for the governor. And, I mean, in all fairness, this is something he didn't see coming. None of us saw coming. But fact of the matter is, Idaho is supposed to be a bastion of freedom. When people look at freedom, they look at this state. Why do you think so many people are moving here? There's a reason why, and we don't want it to change.
We've got more coming up. Both State Representative Dorothy Moon and her husband Darr Moon joining us this morning in studio on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 32 at 8:30. Bill Colley on Magic Valley this morning. We'll get back to calls for our guests in just a few minutes, but we've got something that State Representative Dorothy Moon wanted to touch on. We wanted to mention she's here along with Darr Moon. The two of them are geologists. I think I mentioned that earlier. So their specialty is dealing with a lot of things of the earth, and but also they have been very what you might call politically active for a very, very long time, which she referenced in her remarks at the City Hall Commons in Twin Falls yesterday. It's 30. We're at 8:34. Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You heard that woman call in the last hour who was just so angry with the way this election theft has gone on. And you had some thoughts about this.
Well, I do, and I'm mad too. I'm very mad, but I still think Trump's going to wind up being our president. Otherwise, I'd still be hiding under the bed. But no, I truly do, because I've seen so many different things, and we don't watch mainstream media. We look through social media and radio and what have you. But when she called in about being a mad American, she's right, and we do need to do something. And 2 points I'd like to bring up. There's multiple Republican attorney generals who have involved themselves in a lawsuit challenging the Pennsylvania count of the late ballots. Kentucky, Missouri, my home state, Florida, and these states all have around 60% turnout for the Republican vote. I was looking at the numbers and I thought, isn't that ironic? How come Idaho hasn't jumped in on that lawsuit? Idaho had the higher percentage of 63.9% turnout of Republicans. We should be standing with these other 10 conservative states and let them know that we support our president, and we know that there's been treason and fraud that has occurred. So I think that's really important. I think maybe if our mad Americans here in Idaho should be calling the AG's office and ask him maybe why doesn't he jump in on that. As well as that, we have our 4 congressmen, and 3 of them have made remarks about how the process needs to be fair, and we count actually the ballots that are legitimate. And the only person who hasn't made comment yet is Congressman Simpson. Come on. And I don't think I'll see it happen. I don't think here in the Idaho we'll see it happen. But Congressman Simpson should be supporting our president.
Darr, you might have a thought about that too as well.
Well, it isn't going to happen with most of our elected. They seem to roll over. It really is a people's choice here. People do need to be mad as hell and not take it anymore, because we've had this false security believing that our president can solve all of our problems. Prior to President Trump, during the Obama administration, the Tea Party was born. And not long after President Trump was elected, the Tea Party sort of died and went away. But liberty never can stop, because those evil buggers out there are always gnawing at it. And I think people have let their guard down. So this is a shout out to every patriot in America, jump up. Don't take it anymore. Um, and it really is going to be another grassroots movement. I hope that we don't hear those words, President Biden. But if we do, we know what to do. And people have to resolve that they're not going to put up with it. So we need to direct our energies appropriately. We have to realize that we live in a Republican form of government and that one man can't do it all. It takes our Congress. That's where the power of America is in Congress. It takes our county commissioners, our city councils, our state representatives, because Idaho is the fire line. This is the firewall that we have to hold the feds back. And so it's every little person in every little hamlet in Idaho and across this nation that are going to make the difference. And if you look at the map, the election map, red and blue, you can walk from coast to coast, north to south in Trump territory. There's only islands of blue, and we know where those islands are. And so, folks, pick it up.
I got to mention, we've got about a minute before the next break, but Southern Poverty Law Center, not a friend of conservative Americans everywhere, put out a list the other day complaining about some of the people who were elected around the country. Then they got to Idaho. This was what was, there's a guy from Texas, somebody from Georgia, somebody maybe from Kansas, but it says Idaho State Senate District number 23. Oh, guess who that is? Then it mentions Eric's failed attempt in District 26, and then it says Idaho State House Seat 1A, another sometimes guest on our program. Then it says Idaho State House Senate 11B or House Seat 11B. That's Tammy Nichols, of course. Heather before her, Heather Scott. Idaho State House Seat 32B. That would be Chad Christensen out of East Idaho. So it's interesting that we have so many people who've made this list. They must be very proud that Idaho is. We've got more Idahoans on this list than any other state.
How come I'm not on there? I thought you were going to tell me I was on it. I was going to go, yes, finally.
That's the question, because a lot of these people, it mentions they've gotten their photograph taken sometimes with Ammon Bundy in the past, which you've done on numerous occasions.
Yes.
And Ammon was at the event yesterday. So apparently getting your picture taken with a soft-spoken guy who reads from the Constitution is a threat somehow to the Republic. We've got to get to another break shortly. We'll get back to your telephone calls, too. It is almost 8:40. We're at 29. Darr and Dorothy Moon joining us in studio this morning. Bill Colley as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. But just a reminder, Dr. Christine Pickup joins us just after the news at 9 o'clock. Telephone number, if you'd like to reach the program, is at 208-736-0300. That's 208-736-0300. We are joined by State Representative Dorothy Moon and her husband Darr Moon this morning. He's the founder of Idaho on Fire. It's coming up on 8:43, and we're at 30. Bill Colley with you, too, on Magic Valley this morning. And I do want to point out you can reach us by email as well. And also, if you've downloaded our app for your smartphone, just send me a quick message, a comment, or question. I'll pass that along, too. Let's go back to the telephones. And caller, you're up next. You're on the air. Caller,
Hello?
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, you're on the air, caller. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just had a question for Miss Moon. There was a Secure the Vote rally in Boise on Saturday on the Capitol steps, and there were a whole lot of people there. The only person, there were only a couple of state representatives that showed up. One was, I believe, Mr. Bundy. But, yeah, none of our Magic Valley representatives showed up or anybody. And I think there were probably 1,000 people there. And just kind of upset us all that none of our representatives can take the time to show up to something like that to save this vote that's been fraudulently stolen from us.
Well, I thank you for the call. He's referring to our state representative-elect from Mountain Home, right?
Right. And, sir, I agree with you. And I would have gone. It came at pretty short notice. And I hate to say this. After the election, I shut off the TV after election night. And I thought, well, I'm just going to let it play out. And so we went up on the mountain. Off grid, I mean, I'm telling you, nothing there, cell service or anything. I left everything at our home up the Yankee Fork, went up almost 9,000 feet, burned slash for 3 days. It was very therapeutic, and then actually came back late Saturday when the snowstorm came in and kind of pushed us off the mountain. I would have loved to have been there. It was a fantastic turnout. I try to make those. It's a little bit over a 3-hour drive for me, but believe me, that's no big deal. I drive around a lot. But no, it is too bad. It's very sad when citizens don't have their representatives come and support them and hear from them. It would have been a fantastic opportunity lost for sure.
Want to thank him. And we have another caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Good morning. This is your friend Pete from Boise.
Yes, sir.
And I just appreciate the common sense perspective your guests have on the show this morning. It's so refreshing. They are people that allow us to do our individual thinking and challenge our critical thinking skills. I'm so blessed to have these people out they listen to, and just love your show, Bill.
Hey, thank you, Coach. Coach Pete Colson, one of my close friends, joining us. And he's had to move from Twin Falls to Boise because of work issues. And he got into Boise just in time before the rise in the housing costs.
Good for him.
Good move.
Good for him.
And we have another caller right behind Coach Pete. And caller, you're up next. You're on KLIX.
Good morning. I just want to tell you our story. My husband and I ended up with COVID in July, and we never exhibited fever, so they wouldn't test us down here at our hometown, and so I fortunately was able to get over it within about 7 days. But I was on protocols and supplements because I have several different health issues, and then they're serious enough. They're blood and respiratory related. Well, my husband, 2 weeks into it, they still wouldn't test him, and the doctor, and because they were holding chloroquine at the time, they wouldn't let that be used as medication for people who had these symptoms. Our doctor, the family doctor, would not give him anything, and so he had to tough it out, and he was sick for a month. But anyway, and we're fine now. But in the meantime, I can't believe that this is something that has just arisen. There's no such thing as a coincidence as far as I'm concerned. And I really think that this was engineered. And if you listen to Judy Mikovitz's story, her harrowing story of how she was arrested and jailed because of the research she was doing on viruses and things like that, I think you could probably follow the trail of where this virus originated. And I hate to tell you, but I think it originated, and all roads are seeming to lead to home. And so I just think that this is something that has been thrown here into the American public, and I think they're using it as control, and I just cannot believe that it's anything else but that.
I want to thank the caller. I think we recognize the caller's voice. So she speaks fluent Greek as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, I appreciate her call, and my heart goes out to you and your husband. I can't wait for you to get back to 100%. But we were just talking about this. So we have a doctor from Eagle who came and spoke at the rally yesterday, and she was giving out the hydroxychloroquine and saving her patients. I think all but one who was well over 80. But I think what is disturbing to me is that we have a medical physician epidemiologist who they take an Hippocratic oath to keep their people alive and healthy and do everything they can in their power. And wasn't it President Trump, the right to try? You should be able to try anything you need to pull through in these sorts of situations. But so here we have a governor making these mandates, and I don't know if Governor Little has any medical background. I think he's a rancher. I don't think so. But let's look at our health and welfare director, Jepson. I was actually looking at his credentials with my husband on the way up here. And he's worked for Blue Cross for 6.5 years, might be more now. He has a degree in statistics and mathematics. There's no medical background there. So I don't know. Do you think bureaucrats should be telling a medical professional who's been through all the schooling and has worked with thousands of people what they can and cannot do? I say no way. The doctor has a right to prescribe what they need to for their patients.
It always looked like you had something you wanted to add to that.
Well, yes. I think Vicki Wool had an excellent talk. I was very impressed with her 10-year stay in Venezuela during the communist revolution and takeover. And it's the very same tactic that was done to the Venezuelan people to essentially neuter them, cut them out of the system, give them no voice. And 10 years later, they're eating animals out of the zoo to stay alive. And this is where we are. We're at that tipping point right now. You decide, Americans decide, not these bureaucrats, these unelected regulators. So you better stand up and pick out your most tasty zoo animal because this whole idea is coming to town. It's coming to America. If Biden is elected, he's talking 120 days, 180 days of lockup. Well, what's that going to do to your small business? And 70% of this economy is run by small businessmen. When they're wiped out, where are you going to go? The all benevolent government? I fear not.
We have another caller. Let's get back to the phones. I got about 8 minutes left with our guests. And caller, you're up next. You're on Magic Valley this morning. What's on your mind?
Well, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. When I asked Governor Little, and I've talked to him 3 times since the shutdown in April, and I said, what about all the bars, beauty salons, other social things where you're next to each other? I says, we're losing them. Do you have any idea how many we're going to lose? He didn't answer. And he says, well, they have a high mortality rate anyway. And I thought, whoa, you sound like a compassionate man. You know, a friend of mine was in St. Luke's and Twin. He had COVID. And he said to the doctor, because he knows his stuff, and he said they were giving him remdesivir. And he says, I didn't want to be taking remdesivir. I wanted hydroxychloroquine. And they wouldn't give it to him. And they were feeding, you know, there's so many doctors that said that remdesivir is the reason why so many patients had died of COVID, because it wasn't because of COVID, it was because of remdesivir. I mean, we're so opposed to hydroxychloroquine, I guess, because Trump, you know, said it was good or something. I mean, you know, does it ever end? And, you know, I'm very proud of what the people have done. 71 million people came and voted for Trump. I don't know how many showed up yesterday. We got to fight on. Thank you.
Well, he's got a point there. I could feel the frustration in his voice.
A lot of the people that we all know are actually chiming in today. You're hearing from a lot of friends this morning. We've got a caller. You're up next. You're on KLIX. Go ahead.
Good morning. I mean, the conversation has been just excellent. And that meeting yesterday was excellent. I wanted to be there, but being a truck driver, I never know where I'm going to be. But somebody live streamed it, and I watched all the talks, and they were just excellent. But Dorothy, if you could, somebody needs to get these people to actually take a head count of the people being sick and being hospitalized that's wanting to cause this mass mandate, to find out how many of these people were actually mask wearers. How many of these people had to wear one at work all day? These numbers matter. They matter because if the majority of them were wearing masks on a regular basis and they're sick, that tells you that the masks are worse for you than anything else. Darr, you know, I love your website. And if you are the son of Darrell, then our parents were best friends in high school.
You got me.
Yeah.
And I met you when I was a young man in Yankee Fork Mine.
Okay. Well, then you know I'm a gold miner at heart, and you know I got lucky too because I married a gold digger.
Kyle, I want to thank you for the call. Can I mention your last name on air?
Oh, sure.
Hanks. Oh. And I had the question, Kyle, yesterday. Somebody asked me if you were related to Carrie.
I have so many relatives. I am a 7th generation Hanks in the valley. So I got more cousins than you can shake a stick at. and Darr, my father's name was Lowell Hanks, and he was one of your father's best friends.
Yes, I know. I remember.
Hey, Kyle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'd hate to cut him off. There's like a reunion going on here with. See, this
It's
is a
fun.
huge
Old folks home
geographic.
week.
It's a
huge,
family.
huge geographic state, but so many people know each other. Isn't that amazing? Hey, we got about 4 minutes to go. Anything you wanted to recap with, touch on that we didn't get to, that you think people need to know before you wrap up today?
Well, I do think it's important that, but just like what Kyle said about the cooties in these masks. I mean, we have a lot of higher pneumonia counts, and I think it is a good idea that if someone is in the hospital and you have the opportunity to go and see them, walk down the hall, see how many of the rooms really have name tags on them out in the hall. Kootenai Health, I know that that was an example that had been used. Oh, they're overflowing and all this. Well, I heard from a representative who actually went to Kootenai Health. They didn't have near the people patients that they implied. And it's really more of an issue of staffing. So a lot of people have been cut. And that's where it's unfortunate. So I think that people need to start, if you're there to see a loved one, if you have the opportunity, walk down the hall and see how many people and start reporting. Let people know that these hospitals are not full. Not to say that couldn't change, but I think right now the danger of COVID, again, the deaths have not gone beyond the 700 over the past 8 months. It's just, we just don't have the numbers. And I think people still need to continue and take precautions if they feel warranted. I haven't had to wear a mask. I have not worn a mask yet, except for we went on a flight to Denver, 24-hour turnaround business trip. That's the only time I've had on a mask, and I will not put one on. I just won't. I can't. I cannot breathe. I almost want to pass out. So I feel everybody's pain with these masks, but do what you have to do. And if you have to double up on them, or stay at home.
And I got a note from Joshua and Emmett, and he says, please tell Representative Moon, thank you for being an amazing voice for District 8. We greatly appreciate you fighting for all of us.
Thank you, Joshua. I appreciate that.
I got about 2 minutes. I'm going to squeeze one last caller in just to remind the caller. Caller, you only got about 30 seconds, but go ahead.
Okay, Bill. Hey, I'm not a doctor or virologist or anything, but I'm a mechanic, so I understand fuel consumption, combustion, and exhaust. To me, if you put a mask on, walk around with it all day, it would be like taking the exhaust from your car, running it right back into the carburetor, and trying to run your vehicle. It's not going to work very well.
We got about 90 seconds.
I agree. He nails it, and that's why mechanics do make good money, and you guys should, because that is so true. You keep our cars running, and this oxygen getting to these little kids and getting to our seniors, it has to happen.
Maybe he could run for Jepson's. I think that might make a little more sense than a statistician.
I had a neighbor about 25 years ago, and he did all of my. He ran right out of his garage. He decided to run the business behind the house, and he ran it out of his garage. And he was doing most of the work for me on the car. I had this Plymouth that always was in need of something. And I remember I walked in there one day, and he had all the new computer diagnostic equipment out. And I said, this is like running a doctor's office. It really is.
It is, yeah.
That's the amazing thing. And it's sometimes underappreciated what people do with their hands still when they work with their hands. But that's what keeps, it's small business and people doing that keeps everything going.
You bet.
Well, that's the key right there. There's a lot of common sense out there, folks. And that man is a fine example. We've got farmers that know how to, till a crop, and people from all over this country that have wisdom, hard-earned wisdom, and it's not being used. We've got a lot of eggheads up there running the show, but it's time we turn that around.
We got to wrap up. I want to thank you both for coming in today.
Thank you, Bill.
Short notice. I dropped Dorothy a line yesterday and said, can you come in? And then I wasn't sure they'd be able to make it in studio, but we're very glad you got in today.
I just wanted to see your new beard, Bill. It looks great. You know how I feel about the beard?
Yeah, I think you're the first person to actually offer it a compliment. My dad would have said, when are you going to shave that rat's nest? No. I want to thank you both again, Darr and Dorothy Moon.
Thank you.
We've got a news break, and then Dr. Christine Pickup joining us. There's a bit of a Rupert flavor going through the show this morning. She's coming up next.